Joe Burrow might just be the modern day NFL's version of Odysseus, and I mean that in the best way possible. If I asked you to name the best quarterbacks in the NFL, you'd probably say Mahomes, Josh Allen, Lamar Jackson, Justin Herbert, but somewhere in that conversation, Joe Burrow's name always sparks a debate. Some people think he's elite, others think he's the most overrated quarterback in the NFL. He can't stay healthy, he is Jamar Chase, the defense carried him to the Super Bowl, he hasn't won an MVP. I've heard every single argument. But when you take a step back and look at Joe Burrow's entire career, not just one season, not one playoff run, not one injury, it's hard to reach any conclusion other than this. Joe Burrow is already one of the best quarterbacks in football, and he is NFL's version of Odysseus. It started with one of the worst situations in football back in 2020 when Cincinnati drafted Joe Burrow first overall. This team finished just 2-14 the year before, and they had one of the league's worst offensive lines. And to make things worse, they were asking a rookie quarterback to come and fix everything. Despite the circumstances, Burrow looked ready immediately. In just 10 games, he threw for over 2,600 yards while completing 65% of his passes. The problem clearly wasn't Burrow, it was his protection. He was sacked 32 times in only 10 games before suffering a devastating knee injury that tore his ACL and MCL. For many quarterbacks, that's the kind of injury that changes a career forever. For Joe Burrow, it was just his beginning. 1 year later, Burrow returned from reconstructive knee surgery and immediately became one of the NFL's best quarterbacks. In his sophomore season, he threw for over 4,600 yards, 34 touchdowns, and led the NFL in yards per attempt. He finished with Comeback Player of the Year, and most importantly, he took the Bengals to their first Super Bowl in over 3 decades. Let's just think about that for a second. This is a franchise that hadn't won a playoff game since the 1990 season, and suddenly they won 3 in one postseason. I mean, that's not just a coincidence. That's what elite quarterback play looks like. Now, I understand that there is a huge narrative around that playoff run that the defense carried him, and this is probably the biggest criticism of Burrow's career. People point out to that 2021 playoff run and say that the Bengals defense was the real reason they reached the Super Bowl. And honestly, I really can't argue with that. They're partially right. That defense was outstanding. They forced 8 turnovers in 4 playoff games. They shut down Patrick Mahomes after halftime in the AFC Championship. They give Burrow plenty of opportunities, but here's where people don't want to talk about both sides of the coin for this argument. Elite quarterbacks don't have to throw for 450 yards each week. Sometimes the job is to simply just capitalize when your team creates opportunities, and Burrow consistently did that. He made clutch throws, protected the football, stayed calm under pressure, and most importantly, he won football games. Football is the ultimate team sport. The greatest quarterbacks, they don't win alone. They elevate the team around them, and Burrow has done just that since he entered the league. And keep in mind, since he entered the league, he has faced one of the biggest problems for quarterbacks, and that is the offensive line problem. Here's why, specifically, Joe Burrow's career becomes truly remarkable. Since entering the NFL, he's played behind one of the least consistent offensive lines amongst elite quarterbacks. He's taken well over 200 career sacks, and he was sacked 51 times in 2021, another 41 times in 2022, and then came the playoffs. He was sacked 9 times against Tennessee, which is just unheard of, 7 sacks in the Super Bowl, and one of them came at the biggest point in the game. Most quarterbacks, they don't even survive that kind of punishment, but Burrow kept winning anyways. Imagine what his career would look like right now if he was behind the Eagles' O-line or Detroit's. Instead, every single season begins with the same question. Can Cincinnati keep Joe Burrow healthy? Not because Burrow isn't good enough, because he keeps getting hit. It's that simple. The numbers, they speak for themselves. When Burrow is healthy enough to play a full season, he produces at an elite level. He consistently completed around 70% of his passes. He's posted multiple seasons with over 4,500 passing yards. His touchdown totals have regularly ranked among the league leaders. His career passer rating sits above 100. He's one of the most accurate quarterbacks in football, one of the smartest before the snap, and one of the quickest processors after it. In my last video about Phillip Rivers, I kind of talked about how Tom Brady thinks that the game of football is regressing as a whole, and how quarterback play is a huge indicator of it. I do think that Joe Burrow is one of the players that is moving the game forward, because if you watch how he plays, he's almost never flustered. Pressure does not speed him up. He continues to manipulate defenders with his eyes, which is something we don't see a ton of anymore. He's great at changing protections and diagnosing the blitzes before the snap. He throws receivers open instead of waiting for them to become open, and that's one of the differences between good quarterbacks and elite ones. Physical talent gets you into the NFL, processing speed keeps you there. This is exactly what Tom Brady was talking about when he said, That's where my magic superpower was. It wasn't how fast I could run, it was how fast I could diagnose what they were doing. What's the internet speed of me as a quarterback? And this goes to show that a franchise doesn't need a 4.6 40-yard dash quarterback. Maybe they just need a really smart one that can process things quickly, and Joe Burrow is a great modern-day example of this. This is a quarterback who has won everywhere he's been and is changing the narrative for the Cincinnati Bengals for the foreseeable future. Before him, making the playoffs felt impossible. Now, anything short of a Super Bowl is considered disappointing. That's what franchise quarterbacks do. They change the standard. He helped end one of the longest playoff victory droughts in the NFL, and he also won an AFC championship and beat Patrick Mahomes in Arrowhead, which is a lot easier said than done. He's consistently played his best football in the biggest moments, and those aren't empty accomplishments. They're proof that winning follows him. Really quickly, does Joe Burrow have great receivers? Absolutely. Is Jamar Chase arguably the best receiver in football? 100%. T. Higgins, he's been outstanding ever since he's been Burrow's teammate, but every elite quarterback benefits from talent around them. Mahomes had Tyreek Hill and Travis Kelce. Josh Allen had Stephon Diggs. Lamar has Derrick Henry and a dominant run game. So football isn't played alone. The question isn't whether Burrow has help. The question is whether he maximizes it, and year after year, he does. If anything, Joe Burrow, in his position, I think does more with what he has than a lot of quarterbacks will be able to do. I mean, year in and year out, his O-line is constantly battling injuries and constantly underperforming. So my final thoughts, Joe Burrow, he's not perfect. He's battled many injuries, and he's taken way too many sacks. He hasn't won a Super Bowl, but I'm not talking because I'm a Vikings fan. But again, none of those things can erase what he's accomplished. He's transformed one of the NFL's least successful franchises into a perennial contender. He's consistently produced elite numbers, and he's proven himself in the postseason. He's done it while playing behind an offensive line that has made his job dramatically harder than many of his peers. If Joe Burrow has spent his career behind one of the league's best offensive lines, I honestly think that this debate wouldn't exist. We wouldn't be asking whether he's elite, we'd be asking how many MVPs and Super Bowls he'd already have. Because when Joe Burrow is healthy, there are very few quarterbacks in football I'd rather have leading my team. And that's exactly why Joe Burrow is already one of the NFL's best quarterbacks.